Go to our team here now of experts on this. Ann Flaherty, our senior reporter on this story. John Kott, a Democratic strategist, joins us, and our deputy political director, Mary Alice Parks, is here. Guys, let's break this down a little bit. Ann, starting with you, you have read almost the entirety of the 300-page report so far. Tell our viewers what's in the report. What are some of the top lines? What does it look like?
Well, I think there are two big points in this, Devin. One is that it describes a scheme, and that's a word that the Democrats use to describe how the president leveraged his power in the White House for his own political and personal gain. The second point that they make is that the president tried to obstruct the inquiry. This is the argument that he told his White House staff not to cooperate with the investigation.
At the heart of this is still this same July 25th, 2019, earlier this summer, the phone call President Trump had with Ukraine, released the transcript, rough transcript released by the White House. That's talked about here, but there were so many more dimensions to this story that have come out in the weeks since that transcript was first unveiled. That's all laid out here in sort of a full picture of that moment.
It is, and I think one of the biggest points in this is that it says that Vice President Pence, Secretary Perry, who has since left the Energy Department, we have Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, that they all either knew about this or they were, quote, active participants. And I think that's an important thing to note, that the Democrats are not letting these people off the hook.
And Mary Alice, you've been sort of tracking Republican prebuttal to this. They released a 123-page report of their own to get ahead of this. Their argument hasn't changed very much here, that there's no evidence in their view, which seems to run counter to actually what we're reading.
Well, they're making a very specific argument, which is that there's not evidence to the president's state of mind. Nothing that says the president was specifically trying to do this to benefit the 2020 election. What's interesting there, of course, is that so many of the people that might be able to speak to the president's state of mind have refused to come and speak to congressional investigators. They don't want to participate in this process, and they definitely don't want to be put in the hot seat. You know, this has been a fast-moving process, but a process nonetheless. If you look at this document laid out from Democrats and you compare it to a traditional legal investigation or judiciary investigation, this is basically a bunch of findings that they're now handing over to the prosecutors in this case. That would be the Judiciary Committee. And the Judiciary Committee will look at this evidence and come up with their recommended charges.
And on that list of facts that they've now presented, John, we don't see any of the words that we had been hearing over the past few weeks. We don't see the word bribery. We don't see the word extortion in this 300-page report. But it does seem like that's something that the committee, as they now move into this next phase, will start to craft language in these articles of impeachment.
Absolutely. And I think what you're seeing is the difference between the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee. The Intelligence Committee had their investigation. They found their findings. They're handing it over to true lawyers who are going to actually draw up charges. And that's where I think you'll see Congressman Nadler, Chairman Nadler, actually come up with the new language that you'll start seeing, which will be more legal and more focused on what the actual articles of impeachment are, and which is why I think his first set of witnesses are constitutional scholars. That's the next phase that they have to make to the American people. That's the case they have to make. What is it in this that violated the Constitution? Why is it so important that we impeach him? And
to lay it out.
And a case that they will eventually vote on.
Right.
They're not going to vote on findings from the Intelligence Committee, but the idea is that eventually they're going to vote on some report from the Judiciary Committee.
And that process begins tomorrow.